The Airstream Nation shines from sea to shining sea, and at Airstream of Chicago, we aim to help you explore all of it. As a 5-rivet certified dealership with the largest showroom in the Midwest, we aim to provide you with unmatched customer service and the best buying experience in the industry. We believe everybody should enjoy an amazing RV experience, just as Airstream founder Wally Byam did when he designed the Airstream almost a century ago.
A travel trailer is built to travel primarily, and its main thing is to get places and go places and see things. A good travel trailer has to be built much more sturdily, and it's built very much like an airplane. It's aluminum and riveted and lightweight and strong, and is built for the highway.
Conveniently located just outside Chicago at the crossroads of America means we are here to serve your RV buying and rental needs, whether you're heading north, south, east, or west. Check us out at airstreamofchicago.com.
I think we've got a great program lined up for you next. Program after Mr. Smith talks, he is welcome us to answer questions. So when he's finished, just line up behind the mic outside, and he'll take those questions at that time. Give him a little bit of time to tell us about what's going on. And anybody out there ever visited a national park? Well, maybe I said that wrong. How many have not visited a national park? Hey, you got one over there. I'm looking at it. Okay. I'm going to read this because it's confusing to me, and it may be confusing to Dan. Because officially, Dan Smith is the Deputy Director of the National Park Service and has been serving in that position since January of 2018. However, because there is currently no presidentially, say that one time, nominated Senate-confirmed director, Mr. Smith is exercising the authority of the Director of the National Park Service. So it's a fancy way the government to say he's the acting director of the National Park Service. Yes. This busy man leads more than 20,000 National Park Service employees. Next question, how many national parks do we have? Anybody want to guess? 200? 300? 400? Yes, 419. 419 national parks. We Airstreamers visit a lot of them, and we are huge fans. Mr. Smith has been doing this important public service for quite a while. Here in the great Commonwealth of Virginia, he previously served as superintendent of the Colonial National Historic Park from 2004 to 2015. He more recently is a member of the NPS leadership positions at the Department of the Interior. He's had a long experience along this line. And like me, and maybe it's not popular anymore, but he's a fellow Eagle Scout. Dan Smith was born in Maine, a veteran of the Vietnam War, served in the Army, 4th Infantry, Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Master of Science in Recreational Administration. I think he's qualified, don't you? Let's hear from Dan Smith.
Hello. This is that classic speaking time right after lunch. So Barry took half of my shtick away. I was going to see if you were really going to listen. And I was going to say, how many of you have visited our wonderful state parks? And there are some wonderful ones. How many of you have visited BLM areas in the West? How many of you have visited fish in the country, refuges? How many of you have visited the wonderful sites in our U.S. Forest Service? How many of you have not visited a national park unit? I caught only a couple people. I'm honored to be with you today on behalf of the Trump administration. A couple of quick thoughts. As I headed south on Friday, 3 Airstreams were heading north on 95. Anyone that was between 11 and 3 in the afternoon. Anybody here who was one of those 3 heading north when I was heading south? Well, it reminded me that you were all heading here from all over the country and even internationally. Secondly, how many of you are aware of the blogger in California that's got over 1 million people who want to be in Roswell next month because of Area 51? I got to tell you, if I was an alien with that ability to look at the Earth and look at Earthlings, I'd want to be here because I want to know what the hell you people are doing here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to join you at this wonderful event. It's always fun to join a group of enthusiasts, a community brought together by a shared love of a particular hobby. We have no shortage of such communities with ties to the national parks, but this community is special for several reasons. First, the relationship between the Airstream community and National Park goes back decades. We've all seen vintage photos of Airstreams in our national parks, and supposedly they're going to stream some of those behind me if the audiovisual people are doing their job. I guess they're not doing their job. And secondly, there's a special, particularly American feeling that both the national parks and an Airstream trailer evoke. The urge to explore, to head down the highways and byways of America, to spend time in our parks and appreciate our shared natural resources. I can practically hear the cackle of a campfire that you all sit around in those national parks. The president sort of upstaged me on this event. He hosted at the White House, which is a unit of the National Park System, a Made in America event last Monday. And there were Caterpillar tractors, were John Deere, and there was this Airstream sitting there that he went in. He's a tall man, he had to duck his head a little bit, but he was in the Airstream trailer with Airstream's president, and also Justin Humphreys was there. Justin, are you here? Who's here with you today, who's the COO. So he did sort of upstage me by showing the importance of Airstream to being made in America and being part of his economy that's going on. I'd like to thank Barry Bell, the president of the Wally Byam Caravan Club International Executive Committee, for the invitation to be here today. I'm happy this gathering is taking place in Virginia, not only because it was an easy drive for me up from North Carolina today, but also because I spent part of my 43-year federal career, 10 of which I was at Colonial National Historical Park just down the road. And I hope that while you all are here, you'll be able to see either Civil War battlefields, Colonial, which tells our early history, or I understand a bunch of you are going to go into Washington, D.C. to see the mall. I hope you will take advantage to see the units of the National Park System that are here within a radius that you can get to while you're in camp this week. As stated as the director of the National Park System, I came out of retirement to do that. I thought it would only be for a few months, but I have to tell you, the last 19 months have been the highlight of my federal career. Let's talk about you all. Camping, both tent and RVs, is a significant portion of the 318 million recreational visits that we received in the National Park System last year. In 2018, there were approximately 2.5 million RV camping overnight stays across the park system, 4.9 million tent camping overnight stays across the park system, and 2 million backcountry camping overnight stays. Have been trending upwards for about a decade, and I'm thrilled to see this growth of overnight experiences in the parks. All of this activity has an important economic impact that I'd like to mention as well. In 2018, visitation to the national parks generated over $40 billion in economic output to the national economy. That's a lot of jobs, and parks are critical economic drivers for many communities, and I know you're all aware of that in your travels. When you consider that the annual budget for the National Park Service has hovered around $3 billion in recent years, That's a 13-to-1 return on investment. Park visitor spending on camping alone, by the way, generated almost $500 million in economic output. Infrastructure, facilities, and campgrounds. First, some information about infrastructure facilities. Heard that you're aware that the National Park Service has about a $12 billion deferred maintenance backlog. That's everything from the visitor center that you go to the road that you drive in on. About half of that is roads, bridges, and tunnels. The other half would be buildings and things like sewer systems and water systems. Park Service has about 15,000 miles of road, and so you can imagine that that $6 billion that we spend on that is necessary. I know that when you travel, you always wonder why we have to repair those roads in the summer. Well, that's when roads get repaired. And I visited Yellowstone last year, drove on a 3-mile section that had been completed, wonderfully done, a 3-mile section that was under construction, congestion everywhere, and then got on the 3-mile section that hasn't been touched, realizing why we have to do what we're doing even though it's an inconvenience. So as you travel, please forgive us as we do that. Just like every state, we have to do that in the summer months to get it accomplished. There's currently bipartisan legislation in Congress called the Restore Our Parks Act. About 297 co-sponsors in the House. That's 297 out of 435, and hopefully by this week we'll be over 300. And 41 of our 100 senators have signed on to it. The bills are slightly different, which you can imagine, between the House and the Senate. They're still trying to figure out how we're going to pay for it. Actually, we know how we're going to pay for it. We're going to pay for it with offshore and onshore revenues that we get from development on federal lands. But Congress has something called scoring, where we sort of have to pay for it by giving something else up. But I'm hopeful they're going to come to grips on that. If that bill passes, the Park Service would end up with a funding stream for the next 5 years of about $600 million per year, and we would take a huge chunk out of our deferred maintenance. I'm not allowed to lobby Congress, but I just mentioned that because Congress is involved in a solution for the national park system at this time. Campgrounds. There are approximately 1,400 campgrounds in over 140 national park sites, with RV sites available in about 110 parks. RVs are larger. About 49 campgrounds are assigned to concessionaires in 27 parks, and I know that you've enjoyed some of those concessionaire facilities. We are investing in campgrounds, both those operated by the Park Service and those operated by concessionaires, which are at this time. For example, in June, the Vice President and the Secretary of the Interior visited Yellowstone National Park to view the major project at the Fishing Bridge RV Campground. How many of you have been there? Well, you'll be glad to know that we're addressing deferred maintenance, including replacement of water, sewer, and electrical infrastructure, and hookups renovation of loops to accommodate larger vehicles and other improvements. So hopefully by the time you go there in the next several years, that'll be improved. At Lake Roosevelt National Recreation Area, and that would include improvements to RV campsites at Lake Roosevelt. At Lake Mead National Recreation Area, Boulder Beach Campground. Anybody? Got a $3 million facelift in 2017 that includes repairs to over 70 campsites, ensuring they better meet the needs of modern recreational vehicles. In total for fiscal 2019, the year we're in now, NPS funding is at over $11 million in deferred maintenance and capital improvements in about 200 across 34 park units. I know we're behind on that. These campsites were all developed in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s. We're trying to catch up and see what the Park Service is going to look like in the 21st century, and campgrounds are a part of what we know we need to improve, and we're moving in that direction. I encourage you to keep in mind that virtually every park plans dozens or even hundreds of special events, programs, and activities throughout the year. We certainly continue to offer classic ranger programs, but the creativity and innovative partnerships that park staff are applying these days to offer unique and fun experiences to visitors is truly inspiring. I hope you take advantage of that when you go to our national parks. I am so proud of that 20,000 member staff that I have who serve the American public every day in our national parks. Information about programs is easy to find these days on our website, www.nps.gov, or we have recreation.gov, G-O-V, which Forest Service has the contract for, but on recreation.gov, you can find what's going on in national parks, wildlife refuges, BLM, Forest Service, and BOR at those big reservations. So keep that in mind for those of you that use the internet. I tend not to, but it's there, recreation.gov, with tremendous information what's going on in the national parks and other public lands, which are all there for you all to enjoy. I want to let you know how important outdoor recreation and experiences are to the Department of the Interior. We're operating under a secretarial order 3347, Conservation, Stewardship, and Outdoor Recreation, to improve access across the country for all recreational activities, but a special emphasis on hunting and fishing. The Fish and Wildlife Service just within the last month announced an additional 1.4 million acres have been opened to hunting and fishing on our U.S. Fish and Wildlife Refuge system, and that effort will continue for the next several years. In the National Park Service, we recognize that participating in healthy outdoor recreation is not only good for personal well-being, but also for building relevancy and ownership of our national parks with the next generation. This administration prioritizes partnerships as a step for creation. The department has convened an outdoor recreation advisory committee to improve the efficiency of partnership on public lands. The group brings together leaders in recreation, travel, hospitality, and government to consider current challenges and opportunity, provide new ideas, and suggest innovative approaches. The committee includes representation from the camping and recreational vehicle sector. So please know that your voice is being heard at the Department of the Interior and within the National Park Service as we seek to invest in these plans to improve these areas over the next years. A special way to experience the national parks is by volunteering your time. How many of you have volunteered time in a national park unit? I thought I'd see more hands, but thank you. Every year, hundreds of thousands of volunteers donate millions of hours to help manage and protect our parks. They help visitors to our visitor centers. They work on trail crews. They help with maintenance projects and even give programs. Opportunities is as wide and diverse as the park system, and I encourage you to visit the volunteer section of our website, again, www.nps.gov. A very unique opportunity which this group might be interested in is to be a campground host. You actually can go to a park and stay there for the summer, and we provide a place for your Airstream, and you assist other people in that campsite. Anybody here been a camp host? Front row here. Did you enjoy that opportunity? Outstanding is what I heard. So that is an opportunity, and again, you can find out about that on that website, www.nps.gov. I'm told there's a very unique travel trailer here on site that I can take a look at. It's the limited edition 2016 Airstream travel trailer. This special trailer is an example of the innovative ways our nonprofit partners work with the private sector to help protect parks. This trailer is a special design collaboration between Airstream and Pendleton Woolen Mills, created to commemorate the 100th birthday of the National Park Service in 2016, and designed with a lodge-like feel in the interior, like the classic lodges in the national parks. And every sale of the 100 special trailers generated a $1,000 donation to the National Park Foundation to benefit the National Park Service. That's $100,000 if you do that quick math. I've never seen one of these, so I'm excited to take a look. Thank you for having me here with you today, and I look forward to answering questions that you might have. Thank you. Maybe if I put on my ranger hat and feel like asking an O Ranger question.
Smokey, you don't look that old. For those of us,
73 is a good year.
yeah, for those of us who, as near as we can calculate, live 450 miles from our nearest national park campsite, can we go to the web and find out what is there and how do we make our reservations?
Recreation.gov provides all of that, including being able to make reservations. It's a very diverse system, and I'm the least IT person in America today. My staff would be laughing if they heard me talk about IT at all. But it is a very interactive system that gets you all of those public land sites. I'd like to certainly get you to the Park Service site, but it does include an ability to do reservations. As I understand it, there might still be a few quirks in it, but by next year, it should be something that when you go to that and sit at your table to plan where you're going to go that year, you should be able to do it at your table on that recreation.gov system.
Thank you, sir.
And it is a U.S. Forest Service contract, so if it doesn't work, blame them, don't blame the Park Service.
A little bit of a comment that'll tie into a into a question. We've had experience in national parks where they are being run by National Park Service employees and as well as by the concessionaires. And to be honest, we've developed a relatively strong opinion as to which we prefer. By the way, I like your hat, if that's a clue. We've had, joking aside, we've had good experience with the National Park Service employees. We think that has provided the best experience on an overall basis. If you could speak to what the future plans are in that area, and then before stepping away, I'll make just one other comment. If you could make also comment to what we as citizens of an organization like this can do to help to ensure that you get what you want on our behalf. Thank you for speaking about the future legislation that's being considered, and if there's anything we can do to help you, we'd be interested in knowing that.
Thank you. I'll take the first one. We could not run the national park system without our concessionaires. They provide a tremendous service to us, and this administration, we are looking at better ways through public-private partnerships to continue that. Now, I won't say that in a world where you deal with contracts on things don't arise, but we definitely rely on our concessionaires. The hospitality sector is just something we can't do, and we're very fortunate to have tremendously good partners. If you've had a bad experience at a campground or whatever else, make sure you let the superintendent of a park know that, because he or she can certainly address that with our concessionaires. But I have to tell you, I work with our concessionaires probably not on a daily basis, but every week something comes up, and we could not run the national park system without our concessionaires. I cannot ask you to lobby Congress. All I can tell you is there's a bill in the Congress that might get your attention and might get your congressperson's attention. I'll leave it at that. And thank you for your comments about National Park Service staff. You know, I push a lot of paperwork in this job. One reason why I'm here today is I didn't have to push paperwork this morning. And I'm off to the International Boy Scout Jamboree tomorrow, so I won't push paper Tuesday or Wednesday. But believe me, Thursday, Friday, and probably into Saturday, I'll be pushing paper. The joy I get when I do get out to the field to be with those people that are working with you in national parks, whether they've been with us for 25 or 30 years, or whether they're brand new to the National Park Service, it's a joy when I'm dressed just like I am today and see that staff providing help, information, just courtesy to our visitors. And I'm proud that no matter where I speak like this, that's the way people talk about those who are in the National Park Service, and it gives me great pride that I'm their boss and that I get to do this on their behalf. Thanks for that.
Hi. We've noticed that more and more parks are limiting or even excluding the use of electric bikes. And what I think this is more of a suggestion rather than a question, that maybe just a speed limit be posted. I've noticed people on regular bikes. I used to ride a regular bike, and I would go a lot faster than an electric bike. So I think that I know there's concern about trails being ripped up or whatever, but those of us who have physical issues and really can't ride a regular bike anymore, the electric bike is really helpful, and it gets us out there on the trails. So,
I want you to know I did not load that question. When I get back, one of the things I will probably sign this week is I'll sign the directive to the national parks of how we are going to recognize e-bikes. And mostly there's some little subtleties in the throttle ones, but basically an e-bike will be considered a bicycle. And I will be signing that within a very short period of time.
Thank you very much.
And then they're going to extend that to the other bureaus, but we were the lead agency to develop the new policy on e-bikes.
Hi. I was wondering if you could touch on the relationship between the National Park Foundation and the national parks, if they provide a stable funding stream, if it's a growing funding stream.
Yes, the National Park Foundation is actually chartered by Congress to be the major partner for the National Park Service. If you'd asked me that question 10 or 15 years ago, I would have told you it was doing anywhere near what it should be doing with the portfolio of the congressional charter and to have your client be the National Park System. I have to tell you that in the past 4 or 5 years, the National Park Foundation has become a lion and a giant. Basically, most recently raised $500 million in their latest campaign, and every bit of that in shared type of programs and whatever else comes back to assist us, whether in education for children or certain projects within parks to partner with. It's no longer a sleeping giant. It's a giant, and it's unbelievably proactive right now. And in fact, the person who will become director of the National Park Service very shortly, David Vella, will be in Grand Teton with the National Park Foundation later this week at their meeting, and that annual report will come out that will reflect all of that. They are a wonderful partner and a very successful partner.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks. For many years, I was active in the National Parks and Conservation Association, and one of the running concerns was that the parks being kind of the jewel of the crown of the United States, one of the impacts that they constantly have to wrestle with is the potential of being loved to death. With that, coupled with impacts from a changing climate, I'm wondering if the Department of Interior has done any studies and projections regarding exactly what the park system faces, both the natural part of the parks and the infrastructure in the decades to come.
Yes, we're very aware of the effects of climate change, as is the whole country, including probably this weather that we're in currently here. And those adjustments will be made. That, of course, can affect water levels. Certainly, one of the most interesting reports I saw recently is the change we're going to see in migratory birds. Some parts of the country are not going to see birds they see now, but they may see birds they've never seen before, as those something I hadn't really thought about till they put a piece of paper in front of me of how that's going to be done. We're adjusting, as anybody would, to the effects of climate change. And that affects certainly our seashore parks where we have that effect. It affects all of the units in one way or the other. And so those studies are done. Most of those are done individually by the parks themselves. And we get tremendous support in the Department of the Interior from the U.S. Geological Survey. They're really the scientists that do most of that modeling and all that. You may have seen a month or two ago that the USGS came out with a new model where we were losing the glaciers at Glacier National Park, and they had an estimate that we would lose so many by 2020. And now, because of their latest modeling and what's happened in the change of climate, is now they're pushing that out to 2040. So we rely on USGS, one of our sister agencies at Interior, information in the parks.
Just one related follow-up. Are any of those studies available online for people to read?
There's certainly probably, and again, I would go to www.nps.gov and look at those, and they should be either individual parks or maybe from a national program area. But that nps.gov site should get you to where you can find somebody who can answer that question and get those to you. If they're available, they will be available online. We have all that online now.
If Barry shows you the logo for our club, at the bottom it says rallies and caravans, which means many of us are making arrangements for groups. So anything you can do in the reservation system to make it easier for us to get group reservations would be greatly appreciated, either for a rally or a caravan.
I hear that you're a pretty rowdy bunch is probably why you have problem doing those permits.
Yeah, that's why. And Mark's T-shirt for you today. So.
I've heard, and I did hear that the latest one I was talking, I'm blanking on names now, but to Bill and to who? And to Jay about their recent one on the Blue Ridge, and they did get the permit, but there was a little bit of confusion with it. I will go back and make sure that I will mention what I heard here today is that we do need to address the caravans in a little bit better way.
And also the rallies, because people have rallies in national park facilities as well.
I don't know how we'd handle this in a national park, but I'm glad to be at Secretariat's home, to tell you the truth.
The BLM will have to add more acreage. I'm a little concerned. I'm moving out to Las Vegas with the water conditions at Lake Mead. Is there a plan in place to prevent the water from dropping any further?
Well, I have to tell you, I'm not an expert on the Colorado River Pact, but there's 7 states involved in that. It's unbelievably dynamic with the 3 upriver dams. Part of that water is going as far away as California. Part of it's not going to Mexico like they would like. So what I can tell you is the good Lord's going to have to help us with that, like he did this year with a huge snowfall in the Rockies to help that. But again, it's an unbelievable dynamic river system that's been dammed. Agriculture has to have its share. The towns have to have, cities have to have its share. So to tell you I have a simple answer, I don't. But it's, again, that's another thing USGS is very involved with, and it's just a very dynamic river system with only so much water in it.
Thank you.
We will keep adjusting those ramps to get you on the lake, though, if that's what happens. This year I heard it did go in reverse. We actually got to take out some of the ramps because the water level did rise.
First off, thank you for coming. Thank you for your service to our country and to us.
Thank you so much. It really is a pleasure to be here with you all today. This has been fun.
My concern is I live in North Carolina, and I have a mountain house right off of the Blue Ridge Parkway, mile marker 231. And last winter we had the top down, trees blown down, and assorted things happening up there. And some of us in that area up there have gone to the park people and volunteered to help cut up some of these trees and get them out of the way. We were refused that opportunity. So my concern is we come off of US 21 going south, you go down to Dalton Park, which is a big RV park down there, which happens to be the summer person down there happens to be in an Airstream trailer, which I've talked to for a number of years out in eastern Florida. And there's a big campground across the road from it. And I'm saying aesthetically it's not very pleasing to ride down through. It looks like a drop zone going down through there. Is there some way that we can help? You asked for volunteers. Is there some way we can get to this person or whoever we need to on the Blue Ridge Parkway and get it organized so we get this brush all cleaned up?
All of these circumstances, you have to know all the details. J.D. Lewis is one of our best superintendents in the system. You are able to come and help us. You sign up as a volunteer, and that covers you with the liability insurance that the federal government will offer. The training we require for using chainsaws that we even have to have, the chaps we have to wear, the goggles, whatever else. My feeling is you might want to volunteer to help pick up, but not to actually cut it down. And so I would just say either to that superintendent or to his facilities person who can control that, there are ways you could help, but chainsaws are probably not one way we're going to let you get out there and do things that people can do with chainsaws.
All right, well,
they don't let me have a chainsaw, I can tell you that.
I understand. Well, there's 6 miles that looks pretty tough, and Blue Ridge Parkway, I think, is one of your better parks in the country, personally, and it's very concerning that it looks like it does. And we're willing to help, and I understand the liability of the chainsaws and the chaps, and we may not have the chaps, but we have certainly the safety goggles, and we have cut up trees from hurricanes in the past in this part of the world. So, for what it's worth.
I hear you, and I also have to tell people that after all, we are a bureaucracy, so a federal bureaucracy, and for those of you here that served in the federal bureaucracy, you understand what I'm saying. But again, there's probably a middle ground on that,
Sure.
but I would trust my superintendent's judgment on that.
Okay.
And,
Thank you, sir.
Where in North Carolina?
I live in Charlotte, but I also have a place in Sparta, North Carolina. So we're right up on the Parkway.
Yeah.
And
Well, I only had a 23-mile parkway at Colonial. That's about a 480-mile parkway that JD has.
well, there is there's a dining facility there at Doughton Park, and there's been a group formed in that county up there and put a trust together, and they're in the building, but they're doing all the other work inside of it. Hopefully get that dining facility back open, which is right there by the camping facility also.
That's the kind of partnership we're looking for everywhere we can find it. JD, that I was grilled pretty much on that, okay?
Well, you weren't grilled. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for being here. Certainly you cannot lobby Congress, but certainly everyone here can. And would you mind, and it may be just for me, I may have missed some things, but could you go over the bill that is currently before Congress again so that we have a clear understanding of it? I thought I heard that part of it was private corporations or enterprises could be coming onto National Park Service lands for development. Did I misinterpret that?
That's not part of the Restore Our Parks Act. The Restore Our Parks Act, there's slightly different versions. The Senate bill only deals with national parks because they have committee jurisdictional issues and because I think the National Park Service is the most pressing. The House bill includes Park Service by far the majority of the money, but also includes for U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I believe for Indian schools. It includes those components. And the administration is sort of in the middle of that. We don't have Forest Service money because they're not in our department. So they're slightly different. But all of these would come from the development of our resources, whether it be timber, coal and gas, offshore and onshore. It's the same money that we derive the Land and Water Conservation Fund, but it will not touch the Land and Water Conservation Fund portion. All of the current money that comes from all of our royalties from gas and minerals in this country can generate as much as $16 billion a year going to the Treasury. And what we would be asking for is a portion of that to be taken before it goes to the Treasury to be put towards the national parks. Again, it does not complicate anything with Land and Water Conservation Fund, does not take away from that. It's in addition to that. And that's where the scoring issue comes in of how Congress would take somewhere like $600 million and figure out how they would actually spend that in the budget process.
So it's current development that's ongoing currently, not adding more development for coal and gas. I mean, and the concerns about endangering the environment. It's
everything. It's wind, it's solar, it's oil and gas, it's coal. This administration the last administration diminished all of those resources. This administration is using those. It's on federal lands, it's not on National Park Service lands, but it is on BLM lands, and it is, a lot of it, most of it, is probably from offshore development of oil and gas that's ongoing. So in the development context, yes, it is more development, but that's all done with requirements of environmental concerns on it. And whether it's the what's coming from the Dakotas as far as the oil shale and all that, that's all part of what would go into this fund.
So environmental studies would be conducted prior to allowing this further development?
Environmental impact statements are required on all this type of activity, yes.
And are those regulations being dumbed down a little bit at all?
I don't believe so. I think you'll see something in the press if they want to make a spectacular story that it could be. I do know that the Secretary has visited 2 key areas adjacent to Grand Canyon, and he will make a determination in the near future of possibly not developing those areas. So he's looking at it very, very closely with that keen eye on the environmental impacts, especially to Grand Canyon National Park. There's always debates on that. I am very comfortable as the acting director of the National Park Service with what is going on as far as adjacent lands to national parks, and those all do require environmental impact statements.
Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Jack White, and I've had some exposure to your law enforcement division within the National Park Service.
Have you been looked at like this? Oh, wait. Like this? The Park Service doesn't put that fear in me, but state troopers sure do.
No, I've just been concerned about the antiquated equipment that so many of them have, and my question is, are any of these maintenance funds that you've described are going to be applied toward the equipment that they need to carry out their law enforcement responsibilities? Because it seems to be they're very far behind law enforcement outside of the Park Service.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly where you're speaking, but as a superintendent at Colonial, with my 10 law enforcement rangers, I equip them with tape-ons. I equip them with bulletproof vests. We had in the cars, we had the computers. A major issue for the federal government is what we're going to do or not with cameras, just like other body cameras. That's under consideration, but that's a huge dollar amount. And then also the problem has been, how do you store all that information? There's again, my staff would start to laugh for me to talk about anything about IT, but supposedly that problem of storage is now somehow being corrected because there will be a cloud for it to all to go to. And with parks, we were still loading, for those of you who are old enough to remember 8-track players, we actually had to store that somewhere in that kind of a system. And supposedly that huge technical issue is going to be overcome here pretty soon. I am very aware of what I need to do for law enforcement. I also have to tell you that we send all of our people to the Federal Law Enforcement Academy in Georgia, the same place that the FBI goes, that whatever. The director there has told David Vella, who will become director of the Park Service, that the Park Service candidates who go there are the best students that he has. We come very prepared to take the training very, very seriously. I take it very seriously because I put them at risk because of things that go on in the country. And I think we are equipping them, and so I don't know the example you're talking about, but I do have in the budget law enforcement money to make sure we don't put our people at risk.
Thank you.
If you will, differences in Blue Ridge Parkway and Skyline Drive, and in particular they must be administered differently. I think I pay to go on Skyline Drive, I don't pay to go on Blue Ridge Parkway, and perhaps that really gets to the crux of my question. When I drive on Skyline Drive, I see a scenic turnout and I'm inclined to stop, and I actually see a scenic overlook. When I'm on Blue Ridge Parkway, I stop at a scenic overlook and I see a bunch of trees. There's pros and cons to all of that, but if you'll elaborate, just help me understand the differences of those two systems.
Technically, they shouldn't be different. We are behind in some areas, especially on Blue Ridge. We need to clear those vistas. We get caught in a park between the cultural resource staff and the natural resource staff, and so trees don't get cut. The biggest example we had was in Glacier. All of those unbelievable scenic overlooks. How many have been to go into the Sun Road? We just finished a major renovation there. The next time you ride it, you're going to be amazed. The stonework is back in, the vistas are back in. It's going to be a wonderful ride the next time you take it. But those vistas, those were all built during the Depression by the CCCs, and all of them had landscape architects who, when you have those turnouts, they're supposed to be a vista for you to see. And so if there's a difference between what you're seeing on Blue Ridge as opposed to what you're seeing on Skyline Drive, that's something I'll go back and say that's been noticed. The biggest thing about them is you cross a state line, and so that northern part, the Skyline Drive, being adjacent to Shenandoah National Park, and then of course it comes into the park. It's managed by a different superintendent, but it should not be that visibly different to you. So, and I'm not aware of where you're paying a fee on one and not on the other one. I would have to check into that. I'm not familiar with that situation on those parkways. I think it was Shenandoah Park. It was definitely Shenandoah National Park. Yes. So again, oh, okay. One more here. We'll take both.
I've got a question for you on the situation we had when someone stopped the government from going to work, and our national parks got a lot of trash and pretty much, in my mind, destroyed. And one of the things that I'm sure you deal with in Washington, D.C. is the lessons, some ability to mobilize a group like this and other organizations to help out without trashing these national treasures.
Very good question. I lived through that 35-day lapse. We did have people volunteer to help us in a lot of the parks. We had a lot of our concessionaires step up. We made a closure in 2013 where closed was closed, that we had to do something different. We didn't know quite what to do, but so many of those parks, December, January time frame, and we had people who had reservations. That was their yearly trip to one of the desert parks, their trip to Yellowstone or whatever else. So out of the 419 units of the National Park System, we tried to keep about 60, it ended up being about 75, open in some way, shape, or form during the lapse. What the Secretary made a decision on is the recreational fee money that you all pay to go to a park. Excuse me, that attacked me. That money is available for us to use for visitor enhancement, for law enforcement, for health and safety reasons. And we had no idea that the lapse was going to go that long. That's the longest one in history. I hope nobody ever has to go through a lapse that long for any government agency, but especially since I was involved with it with the national decision to utilize those funds in those parks. And so the first 10 days got way ahead of us in probably a dozen parks. The national press sure made an issue of Joshua Tree, but once we released that money and brought people on board, those bathrooms, that trash, all that was picked up. We had people at the entryways to give people guidance on where they were going to go. We did not open visitor centers, but we made it so literally hundreds of thousands of visitors. The Statue of Liberty, we kept the Statue of Liberty open, which it would have been closed otherwise. And so the Floria money was used. It'll be used again if we have another lapse. It'll limit the number of parks we can do that in. It would limit time of year we could do that in. But I signed the order to the Park Service to do that after the Secretary approved it. As a professional person, I'm very proud of that decision. And if we have another lapse, we will try to keep some parks open as we're able to with those funds. Congress has made fairly big deal about it. I've spoken before the Congress on it. The law allows it, and we utilize it. That was a change from past practices. Kind of cover that in a very broad scope. But I'm very glad we used the Floria money, and we will possibly use it again. Congress hasn't given us an appropriation on time since 2006. I've had to go as late as June to actually get money. They fund us day by day, month by month, and then I have to spend, when they finally do give us our funds, I have to spend everything that last quarter of the year if I'm going to contract or whatever else. Congress has not made it easy to run a national park system for the 19 months that I've been acting, and I wish that they would do a better job of getting us our funds so we can serve the American public. That's probably more of a statement I should have made, but I made it. That's from being frustrated about a 35-day lapse.
As a Department of Defense retired natural resource manager, I understand what you're talking about in appropriated funds. But funds that are generated in your major parks, does that money go back to the Treasury and then divvied out back to the individual parks? It doesn't stay with that individual park that is generated. Is that correct?
Years ago, that would have been the case. No, in the most current legislation, a park collects the money. Let's use Yellowstone as a good example. 80% of that money they send to Washington in a fund that I can keep to utilize to help parks that don't collect money. We only collect fees in about 117 of our 419 units of the National Park System. So that 20% comes back. But 80% of it stays in those parks for projects that have to follow the Act, have to be for interpretation, visitor experience, facility maintenance, law enforcement. It's all very spelled out in the law, but 80% of it stays there. And of that 80%, it's our policy that we try to put 55% of that remaining 80 towards deferred maintenance, towards projects to improve facilities. And then it costs about 15% to collect it. To have somebody there in that booth to collect it is about 15% of the money. So that leaves about 10% that parks have free rein to do things that are not in those other categories. But no, the money stays in the parks, and so when you visit and pay at Yellowstone, you know that your visitor, except for those of you with those darn senior passes, you... I've got mine in my billfold, so thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
It's down here, so I'll speak down here. He did a great job. I hope he answered all your questions. Give me a minute, because he told me he liked this green hat so well, he's going to trade me that Smokey Bear hat for it. So did I get that wrong?
You got that wrong.
Oh, well, anyway, we want to give you a hat for my rally. Don't forget the entertainment tonight. It's not going to be a barbershop quartet. It's going to be about 30, 40 guys up here. It's going to be a great chorus. So come back.
Could I do it? Where would I go? Where's the bathroom? Could I take it there? 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 Am I ready? Stop wondering. Start wandering. Airstream. Take the first step today.